All right, good. There it is. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this is the subcommittee on policy. And the first thing I'd like to do, this is our first meeting of the 2024 session. And what I'd like to do is reiterate our chairman and his priorities he set for the education committee is we are laser focused around safety, literacy, and good policy. And so you'll see that reflected in a lot of the bills that we read today and going forward this session. What I would like to do, is there any teachers with us in the room this afternoon? Any current teachers? We've got one right there. The committee, give them a big round of applause. Yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. With that, Representative Paris, will you open us up for a word of prayer?
Thank you, Chairman. I sure will. All heads bowed, hearts open. Father, we thank you for this day that you have made, that you have created for us. We thank you for all of your blessings. Lord, we ask you to give us your wisdom, your insight, your oversight as we deal with these issues for our children in the state of Georgia today. Give us your wisdom, your insight, and your knowledge. And we thank you for all things. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Representative. With that, I'd like to call to the front here. We'll be hearing House Bill 941 first by Chairman Irwin. I believe we heard and passed this bill last year. Nope. New bill. Love it. Let's pass it again.
Thank you.
Yes, Mitch. You are on.
Thank you. Let me begin this meeting. Representatives, by first of all thanking you for being here, and also Madam Chair, thank you for being here too.
That joke goes back to last year, but I deserve every bit of that. So
yes,
yeah.
Yes. He didn't think I would remember that from last year, but I do remember it. So thank y'all for the opportunity before you here today. I would love to tell you that this is a simple bill, but I think when you get into the capital outlay program for the state of Georgia and how we fund those programs and school construction, it gets complicated quick. But what we would like to explain to you, in my LC number, Mr. Chairman, is 491634. And just a simple explanation here is that as many of you know, QBE is written for K-12. Same is true for our capital funding, capital outlay program is built for the K-12 education in this state. And we are lottery funded for our pre-K program. And I believe you'll understand this if you'll just stick with me here. We allow what we call entitlement dollars to be earned for systems so that they can accrue money. We sometimes discuss with them about forward funding them so that they can build their facilities based on need, which one easy need would be looking at an increased population of students, therefore qualifying to build another classroom added on there. If you have currently in our capital outlay program, if you have a pre-kindergarten class taking up a space, that is a detriment to your entitlement dollars. Your entitlement dollars would grow not as a fast of a rate as if we could count that as a pre-K classroom in our capital outlay program. So currently what this bill does is it allows for the pre-K classroom to be listed and also counted as a classroom in a school for these dollars that school systems apply for future building, to stay up with their growth and for renovation purposes. So that is a simple answer to something that is pretty complicated on how we go about in this state doling out those dollars. So what we have done then would be, you could imagine if you were looking at an architectural plan for a school designed, you will see that we will have a pre-K classroom labeled on that plan if a school system wants it. Remember, it's voluntary for them to do this with their lottery dollars. But now what we're doing is giving them the opportunity to label it on their plan, build that facility, and it then count towards them and their accruement of their capital outlay money. And then before we get to any discussion on this, I do want to offer up an amendment to lines 14 and 15 on the first page there, just for clarification purposes, that we understand that. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to let our legal counsel, Michael Walker, read the amendment that I'd like to offer up to that sentence right there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment would be on line 14 and would be between or after the words programs provided, we would insert the words and operated. And then on line 15, after the word system, but before the comma, we would insert as part of Georgia's pre-K program. There would be similar amendment on lines 32 and 33 to accomplish the same objectives. On line 32, following the words programs provided, on line 32, we would insert and operated. On line 33, after the words be provided, we would insert and operated. And after the words school system, but before the period, we would insert as part of Georgia's pre-K program. And finally, on line 3, after the words educational facilities for, we would insert the word certain. And that is it.
Michael, I may ask you, can you walk through real quick what those changes, either you or the author, what it accomplishes? Yeah.
This, as I understand it, is an agency request and would be consistent to clarify that the bill is not intending to cover voluntary pre-kindergarten programs in general, rather would be limited to voluntary pre-kindergarten programs that are part of Georgia's formally established Georgia's pre-K program. So even though that sounds generic, we actually have what is called the Georgia's pre-K program. And so the only pre-kindergarten programs that would be covered by this bill would be voluntary pre-kindergarten programs that are provided and operated by local school systems that are part of Georgia's broader Georgia's pre-K program.
Thank you.
And then, Mr. Chairman, if I could continue on, then, this is to assist schools at continuing to offer pre-K programs at their facilities, and also not, what I'll say, ding them for having one and taking up a space within their building if we allow dollars to be accrued for that space just because we filled it with pre-K kids rather than kindergarten kids. So this bill is to open it up to allow more access and for those school systems that voluntarily want to add that, can add those classrooms without it being a detriment to their accrued dollars.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this bill. I know Speaker Pro Tem Jones and her team over the summer did a lot of work on this subject, and I believe that's probably what led to this legislation here. And part of their findings was that our pre-K was woefully underfunded, and I think this will help kind of bring them up to speed. And the importance of pre-K, the earlier students start to learn, the better prepared they are down the road. So with that, I see a couple questions on the board. I'll go to my left first, number 18.
So much, Chairman, for bringing this wonderful bill. Absolutely, we are excited about school facilities being able to use these additional classrooms for pre-K, but I do want to say that I hope we'll vote up to the amount of money that it will take to put the equipment in the classrooms. I think our Pro Tem Jones has about $30,000, so I hope we'll do that so that the money goes and the classes are equipped.
Yes, Representative, thank you very much. And yes, that is one of the recommendations of the committee that I believe since the inception of our pre-K lottery-funded program, that number for equipping a classroom has not changed from $8,000 from the inception. So it is time to realize that it does take more than that to equip a classroom full of at least 20 children. So thank you for that comment.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go to my right, your left. Floor Leader Wade with a question.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Chairman, for bringing this important move. Just to clarify for capital outlay, there are schools in the state that have older, like an elementary school, or even I know in my district we had a building that was a K through 2 building that got aged and for a period of time was closed. This would allow potentially local school systems to put that back into their capital outlay request if they wanted to reopen an existing facility that has been closed for whatever reason, spend money to remodel it, and then add a pre-K space. Is that correct?
Floor Leader, there is a process that is in place
Right.
to phase out schools in their capital outlay program. I will defer. We have the director of that program sitting behind me. Mike Sanders directs the capital outlay program for the state, but we do, I feel certain, and maybe a nod ahead, that we phase in classes in old buildings too if we needed to. Is that correct? Why don't you come sit next to me, Mike?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir. There is a process. Typically, once a building's been phased out, it is if a system does reopen it, typically it's for a lot of growth, and so there is a process to reopen it. Those facilities have not been eligible for entitlement unless there has just been explosive growth, and they show that, and then we try to work with them to bring that back into the entitlement piece. Those have been few and far between. Obviously, I think this is that is one of the points that we're going to need to consider in how we move forward, because we do realize that there are several pre-K programs in phased out facilities. So that is something we'll have to work through in making that happen.
So you're saying there's a chance?
There's a chance.
Okay, thank you.
And
There's always a chance. It depends.
Just for the benefit of the committee, do you mind introducing yourself real quick?
Certainly. I'm Mike Sanders. You'll see Michael, but I go by Mike. I'm the Director of Facility Services and Pupil Transportation for the Georgia Department of Education.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. We're going to go down to my right here, Representative Evans with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this bill. I wanted to, and I'm very supportive of it, but I did want to ask about, this is just for the public pre-K classrooms, right? And so I do remember hearing from our colleagues that we want to make sure we help out the private pre-K programs. I think it's something with the lease agreement. Will that be in separate legislation, or does that require legislation? I wanted to ask you about that.
Yes, good question, Representative. The committee did have findings too that I believe a little over half, or approximately half, of our students are provided that their pre-K program through private providers, and with that, you could imagine if we tried to shift all that into the buildings we got now, we don't have space for them. But we did, the recommendation quickly became that the need for those private providers in the structure that we have is very important. Recommendation then was to pay for the lease of those facilities and to facilitate them in a similar fashion to what we're doing here, not in a capital outlay program, but to provide space opportunities for the private providers also, and that is still in the recommendation, and that will be decided by appropriations when we work on the big budget that we're about to start working on, as that recommendation goes there. So the answer is there is not a separate bill at this time, or from what we understand, a need for a second bill, as we can do that. We just have to appropriate the funds, and it would be by appropriation, Representative.
So, can we have one
Yeah,
follow-up?
one more.
Okay, thank you. So, and also, if a school uses federal Title I funding for a pre-K classroom, would this allow them to count it as a pre-K classroom?
Yes. The answer is yes. Currently, they have the federally provided, which is mandated by the federal government for the pre-K programs. But for the dollars that this gentleman oversees, that does not work into their advantage. And that's what I'm trying to clarify right here. Now those federally funded programs will work to their advantage for the capital outlay money.
Right, okay, thank you.
And to the audience, I'm more of a rap and R&B guy, but I will dance to salsa whenever you want. Love it. We're going to take one more question, and then is there anyone in the audience here to speak to the bill? I don't see any. All right, Representative Paris with a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Irwin. Appreciate you being here today with us. I think legal counsel said there was a change on line 14 that provided by certain local schools. Is that where?
I'd offer to have him read again and maybe read the entire line, not what was added.
Right. Thank you.
So if the amendment were to be adopted, Mr. Chairman, it would read, line 14 and 15 would read, or the underlined portion would read, and of any voluntary pre-kindergarten programs provided and operated by the local school system as a part of Georgia's pre-K program.
Okay. I think I've got
Certain is on line 3. That's in the title of the bill. Mm-hmm. That is just an indicator that it does not apply to all voluntary pre-K programs. Rather, what that says in the title is that in the body of the bill, there's some definitions around what voluntary pre-K programs would be included.
Okay, and how would we know which ones those are?
They would be the ones that are part of Georgia's pre-K program.
Okay.
Georgia's pre-K program is the lottery-funded program for Georgia's pre-K. So even though we're using generic terms, Georgia and pre-K, it's actually a program in the code that DECAL operates, Georgia's pre-kindergarten program. Mm-hmm. So the pre-K programs that would be provided and operated at the local school would fall under this bill if they are part of that lottery-funded Georgia's pre-K program.
Okay.
And those are the certain ones that are contemplated in the title.
Okay, thank you.
For clarification purposes, Mr. Walker, would you do that same reading on line 32 and
Yes,
33, the changes?
32 and 33 would read, may include projected student counts for voluntary pre-kindergarten programs provided and operated or anticipated to be provided and operated by the school system as part of Georgia's pre-K program.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd offer that up as an amendment and would hope we could vote on that.
I think we have a member who is about to make a motion to my right, Floor Leader Wade.
Yes, sir. At the appropriate time, if you're ready, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the amendment that has been recommended? Or do we have to do a motion on the bill first and then what I always,
Well, yeah, we do the amendment first.
actually,
Make a motion on the underlying. Yeah, yeah.
okay, that's right. Okay, so I'll make a motion to pass.
Do I have a second on the motion? Second. Any discussion? I'll throw it back to you.
And now I'd like to make a motion to amend as the chairman has provided with the legal counsel's wording that was outlined on line 3, 14 and 15, and then as well on lines 32 and 33, as he just read a few moments ago.
All right, do I have a second on the amendment? Okay. Before we vote, Representative Evans, did you have a question? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to confirm, so I guess I'm wondering what pre-K programs would not be covered? Is it basically like the pre-K programs, like at a church program that's not full day or something? Is that what we're saying? Because most pre-K, I mean, basically any pre-K program that's in the lottery system we're covering, yeah, in the Georgia. So, but why was there a concern that people thought it might apply to these other pre-Ks?
I would defer to the author. I would simply say the language in the bill would be if it is a voluntary pre-K program that is under Georgia's pre-K program, it would be included in this bill.
Right.
I'm not able to define exactly what is or what is not in that program.
Yes, I agree there. Or a clear would be 3-year-olds. Decals in the room too. We could talk to them. You know, with their regulations, could be 2-year-olds. I'm assuming could be 1-year-old. But what as we define pre-K program is what we're wanting to change.
I
here.
see. Thank you. So may I just clarify?
I'm going to keep it moving if we can because we got a couple bills after this. Thank you. I'm going to take one more question. We're going to vote on the amendment. Representative Wilkerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize. This may have been covered, but just to clarify, I guess to add on to her comment, so it's operated by the official pre-K program. It's voluntary, Georgia pre-K, voluntary. Did we also say that it has to be under the school system? Because aren't a lot of the pre-K programs private? I don't know if they're are they under the school system, or are they just private pre-K programs that kind of bypass the local school system?
Representative, it would have to be is his money that we're talking about here is the capital outlay money is directed only to public schools. So this is not money that would be allocated and allowed to private facilities.
Okay, so to answer that question, I guess that would be the case then, though. Like in Cobb County, the majority of the schools would not be covered because they are private pre-Ks. That's what I wanted to make sure.
Those would not qualify for this dollar.
All right. We've got a motion on the table to approve the amendment. I'm going to go ahead and call to question. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. All against, say nay. All right, amendment passes. Then we have a motion. Actually, have you? Yeah, we got a motion and a second on to do pass. All in favor of that motion, say aye. All opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes, and you are on to full.
Great. Thank you all members, and thank you for your time and thinking about our youngest students.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Next to the main stage here is Chairman Leverett presenting House Bill 846. If you'd come on up. And while you're getting settled, I've got you reading from LC 491718S.
I believe that's correct. I'm not sure I have gotten a copy of the substitute yet, but that was my own fault for
It's making its way down to
promoting
you.
it this morning. But
Yeah.
I do believe I'm familiar with the contents of it.
Keep us entertained in the meantime.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a bill that grew out of a meeting with the Wilkes Lincoln County Retired Educators Association. One of the members of that association was a teacher in a system that does not participate in Social Security or does not collect. And I was not aware that was an option, but apparently for governmental entities, at least for school systems, that is. So there are some systems throughout the state that do not, whose employees thus are not participating in Social Security system. And I think this particular employee was not exactly aware that that was the situation until she got to the point where she could draw Social Security and learned she wasn't eligible for it. So and that sort of prompted a discussion at the meeting about, well, should school systems be doing this? I think many school systems throughout the state do. Some, many systems throughout the state do participate. So their employees are eligible and entitled to Social Security. They pay in. Some do not. After some discussion, I didn't feel that I necessarily wanted the state to dictate that particular policy statewide. I felt like one is a former school board attorney. I do believe in local control. I like school systems to retain autonomy on these things. And number two, I figured it would not particularly foster the chances of the bill's successful passage if I were to take that approach. So what we did with Legislative Council, I appreciate Legislative Council assisting with this. It really just requires notice so that employees are sort of compelled to think about the issue at least on an annual basis and try to make decisions for themselves based on that fact. So it just makes sure they're aware. As amended, we just like the original bill, it just says once a year this has to be discussed with the employees, and then we've added a provision saying that they would have to be there would need to be some kind of notice generated for it, and then we provided that it would only apply going forward, so systems won't have to go back and do this for every existing employee. It's just as they bring the new employees, they would do so. So that's the gist of the bill.
Perfect. That's great. Well, we'll open it up to questions. First question to my right, your left, is number 24.
Thank you, Chairman Libbert. Hey, question for you. I'm just kind of reading through this and apologize for not pre-reading it. So you're just basically saying in the notes, the employees in those systems, I was part of that system before, not your system, but a different one like that. They just have to, whether it's Social Security tax will be withheld from their pay or not. And I assume that's for retirement purposes and all that. I know
Yes.
some systems.
Title II is primarily the retirement portion of Social Security.
Okay, and eligibility for certain benefits. You talk about the insurance package and the Georgia Breeze and all that.
Yes, sir. We just sort of decided to include the, I guess, what all the different options were
Okay.
within that discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I would assume that's always, but this would just make sure they do it, like a checkoff kind of thing,
Yes.
like opening your checklist.
And I'm
The admin.
assuming this is probably done. It may just be that people don't always remember that it was done, and so this is a way just to require it in code and also provide for a written record. I think most HR people are going to document the conversation
Yeah.
anyway, but we just put that in code as well.
No, it makes sense. And then they would just have their own, each county would develop their own system documenting it. That way they have it on hand in case somebody questioned it.
Yes, sir.
Are there any penalties if they don't do it?
There are none. We have not provided any in this code section. I'm not aware of any elsewhere that would apply.
Okay. But it would look bad if they didn't, so.
Yes. I mean,
Okay.
there could potentially be some consequence to them, I suppose, but we have not expressly provided for
Well,
one here.
I can tell you the one with the taxes, Social Security taxes, that confuses, I'm gonna say teachers, but everybody, teachers, admin, all the time, not knowing when you retire in a certain system that doesn't pay into Social Security and how it's a tough issue. So I'm glad you're doing this. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I remember getting my first paycheck and being very angry at who FICA was and why they were taking money away from me. Yeah. We'll go to number 29, Floor Leader Wade.
Thank you. Just real quick, I'm not going to make any recommendations to make any changes, just initial feedback from HR directors that I know. I called one after you and I spoke. In certain systems, it might make sense to do it, just as a part of their new employee package, and then maybe, at a minimum of every 5 years instead of annually, because it's a lot of paperwork. And just acknowledging something, especially in smaller systems, when you have, a assistant superintendent that's also the HR director, that's also, I think there might be some, at a minimum, but would not, if they want to do it annually, that school system can do it. But I know some school systems, it could become a little bit of a paperwork headache. So I'm not making the recommendation. That's initial feedback that might be amenable to the author.
And I'm certainly receptive to critique and suggestions, so I would be more than happy to bring that back to the committee if we could work on that amendment. If you could tell me a little more about that conversation, because I think it's good to get feedback from people in the field who would have to be dealing with the statute.
Yeah, perfect. Representative Wilkerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 quick questions. One, has any conversation been had? First of all, this is great information. Any conversation with TRS regarding any input they may have?
I have not.
Okay.
I reached out to GSBA to see what their feeling was on it. I think they're neutral. I've not talked to the superintendents, nor have I talked to TRS at this
Okay.
point. But
TRS might be good only because it's dealing with retirement benefits, and sometimes they can, maybe have some input. And then 2, thank you for that. On lines 23 through 25, I'm just thinking about process here. So this is going to pertain to all employees, certified and non-certified. Okay. And then is the correct term hiring or rehiring, or is it just really, are you rehiring someone when you sign a new contract, or is it just upon contract acceptance each year? Just something to think about.
Yes, I mean, that's a good point. As I read it, it would refer to hiring someone, and if they leave for a period and come back. I know teachers are always subject to a new contract every year, so that could be the intent of it, and that's maybe something we can clarify.
Yeah, so if we could clarify that, because if I have a teacher now that signs new contracts, they'll never get a notice because they will never be rehired unless, if that's the intent.
Yes.
And then the last part, I'm an accountant, 2 means 3, I guess, is if we start July 1st, I think by then all the contracts are signed for this year for a lot of folks. So you may want to either say, give a date like September or something like that, and then annually upon whatever date. But I think July 1st, you're going to miss a whole year there, potentially.
Well, thank you, Representative. That's a good point. So I think that's something, if I understand the concern, it's that contracts are usually issued in the spring. And so to provide a July 1 date would be after all the hiring and rehiring had been done for this year. And so it might be good to provide a subsequent date.
Yeah,
Okay.
subsequent date and then annually after
And
that.
then annual thereafter. Well, or every 5 years if we take that recommendation as well. But thank you. Yes, sir.
All right, I'm gonna take one more question. Representative Evans had lunch today. I can tell she's full of questions. Go for it. Yeah, I love it.
So these other school systems.
If you want to pull your mic up too.
So these school systems that don't participate, they're offering other savings plans for their retirees?
Well, my assumption is at least the teachers can use the teacher retirement system. I'm not sure what other non-certified employees are eligible for. I don't know if they offer anything for them or they're just simply exempt from having to require participation in Social Security.
And I want to just say, I think this could be really helpful because, and I'm not entirely clear this is the case, but in DeKalb County, I remember a teacher told me she did not know that she didn't get Social Security, and suddenly when her husband died, she thought if they had both been contributors, she could have gotten a lot more money, or maybe like she wasn't eligible for his benefits or something because she had never contributed. I don't know.
I believe she would still be entitled to the death benefit as a spouse, but I think you're right.
No.
If she had been paying in herself, she would be entitled to some as well for that. I think after death, you can elect, or again, I'm not positive, but having it for yourself does impact the amount.
Right, and I would just say, Mr. Chair, if someone might be able to speak to that, I think that would be helpful, just to know, for us all to understand that this really is kind of a problem for some people.
Yeah, assuming we make it through full committee, would love to hear more on that. And then, if I may inject my own opinion, I did, there was some credence, I think you just said, about doing it annually. Maybe we look at every 5 years, I'm cognizant of we put a lot on our schools and our administration, and so how we can so maybe we can work up a sub for full, With
What
that,
is your process, Mr. Chairman? Would y'all meet again next week, and I would, at that point, be able to bring you an amendment or a
Yep.
substitute back?
that works.
Okay.
Yep. With that, I've got, I believe, a motion to my right here. Representative Cox.
Yes, and before I do that, there's a 403B plan, I believe, and I think floor leader at the county where I coached and you were, I believe that's what was utilized in lieu of, and a lot of the teachers and everyone appreciated that as well, but understanding that process is really critical. And I think the school contract on a 9-month, I think it starts in September. Someone around here would know that. So making sure we dial that in. You have 8, 11, and 12-month contracts too, so it's a floating scale. So you could refer to something to dial that in a little bit.
Okay.
At the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion to pass.
Yeah, here's what I'm going to recommend. I think what we'll do is, since we've gotten a lot of great feedback here, if you don't mind, work up a sub, come back, we'll get you in and out and through next week if that works out.
Happy to do that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
And
perfect.
appreciate all the engagement and feedback from the committee.
Yep, this has been really good. Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Yep.
and thank you, members of the committee.
I didn't see anybody. Was anybody here wanting to speak to his bill? Come on up. Super. Representative Cannon, if you could just. Right now, yeah, you're good. You can. Yeah.
I'm Margaret Ciccarelli from PAGE, the state's largest teacher organization. Wanted to thank the author for this bill and the effort to provide more transparency regarding retirement benefits. I didn't fully prep on the beginning of on Social Security and how it impacts teacher retirement, but my understanding, and I know at least Representative Wilkinson, maybe some others of you are on House retirement, can jump in here, but 20 years ago, some school systems were given the opportunity to opt out of Social Security. They cannot opt back in. And as the requirement to opt out, then they were also required to adopt a kind of a secondary pension program. So or 403B. Now, all of these school districts also participate in TRS, but they can, on top of that, either do Social Security or another retirement program that they may have created, much like the DeKalb one that you cited. But regardless, transparency regarding available options is critical, and we certainly have no objection to making the compliance with this easy and routine for school systems the way that Representative Wade suggested. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to provide comment.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, we've got Representative Cannon up to the mic there.
Testing.
Here to talk to us about mills, not carpet mills.
Drugs or rugs, not drugs. Is that one?
That's right, baby.
Representative Cannon, reading from LC 491680S.
Correct.
Awesome.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thanks for the chance to talk about this bill. Appreciate Chairman Irwin's help and also the Pro Tem's help and also Ledge Council. But essentially, this thing, the bill does two things. It tries to accommodate for the rise in property value since 2019. And when the most recent threshold for equalization funds was set at 14 mills back in 2019. It also provides an enforcement mechanism to reduce a portion of equalization funds from any school system who set a millage rate or an equivalent millage rate, which is important, below the new threshold of what the bill proposes is 10 mills. So just a little history here in context. Back in 2015, the state set a baseline millage rate of 14. Actually, it was at 12. And over the years, it went from 12 up to 14 and ended at 14 in 2019. A couple of things have happened since 2019. We've had a pretty good increase in our property tax digest across the state. If you look at the recent figures from audits, you see about $150 billion increase in property tax digest over the last couple of years. We've also had the internet sales tax come into play, and some systems that received the lost penny, the operational penny, that is designed to put downward pressure on the millage rate that the school system has. So you couple that with pretty record revenues for sales taxes on the school system, and also pair that up with an increasing digest, a school system that is bumping up against the ability to roll back a millage rate can't do it because there's a threshold there of 14. And some school systems can do it. You may have heard a couple of instances last year where I know in Elbert County, Bullitt County, they could roll back, but this 14 mil baseline rate was kind of in the way, and they didn't want to lose equalization funds. So that's the issue. The other issue is that some systems have rolled below that 14 threshold. And there's really no clawback mechanism to not really punish them, but just basically say you've gone below the statute of 14 mils, and we're going to take back some of your equalization money. So that's what this thing does. It basically takes them from 14, and if you think about 14 set in 2019 versus a property tax digest of $400 billion, that 14 is still there, but now the property tax digest is $600 billion. So 14 times that number is an increase. That delta is an increase. And school boards are passing that tax increase on to homeowners primarily because of this 14 threshold. So 10, which we discussed back and forth between chairman and pro tem ledge council, puts every system back in compliance. And then we added in the substitute, actually adds in the clawback provision to take 25% of the equalization funds away from the school system the following year. That way we kind of keep a base load threshold of 10 mils across all school systems in the state. So that's essentially what it does. And I'll take any questions or make any more comments if I know. I think Chairman Leverett would like to comment on the bill at some point, but I'm open to any questions.
Perfect. I'll open it up. Saw 24 first.
Thank you, Representative Cannon. Appreciate your bill, and I know you've been working hard on it. Question for you. So in the, I guess, Reader's Digest version, basically this would reduce property taxes with the loss, and the voters would get to decide?
That's correct. It would allow school systems that can roll back to roll back without the fear of losing equalization. Also, the lost penny, which is about 8 school systems for operational expenses that they receive, is putting downward pressure on millage rates. And if they hit an arbitrary millage rate of 14 that was set 5 or 6 years ago, but the sales tax revenues allows them to replace that with sales tax and push that further, then they're at risk of losing equalization. And so it puts them in a kind of a no-win situation. Yeah. Which we probably ought to address. So.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to go to my left here, Representative Glaze with a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I actually thank you so much for bringing this bill. You answered my question. I wanted to point out where there are regions where there hasn't been this great increase in the property digest, they still can get the equalization.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's
Thank
correct.
you so kindly.
I just want to also add that SPLOST or eSPLOST has traditionally replaced funding in O&M from property tax. So SPLOST, even though it's restricted to capital, is still helping to replace revenue traditionally drawn from ad valorem taxes.
I'm going to go to my right here, Representative Cox.
Thanks for bringing this. Why are we stopping at 10? Why not 8? And how does that reflect with equalization?
It's a good question. 10 puts everyone back in compliance. So no school system, as of today, is at 12.5. So it gives school systems about a 2.5 mil gap to roll back if they wanted to over time. But I agree, at some point, if we need to relook the threshold of 10, I think we ought to do it. That was kind of a compromise between talking to the pro tem and the chairman that take them from 14 down to 10 to accommodate for the increase in property digest values increasing over the past 5 years.
Is there any harm in going ahead and setting it lower and knowing that we maintain it to keep equalization?
I don't know, but the original intent for equalization is to ensure some counties have their fair share of ad valorem taxes contributed to the school system. So the 10 mils kind of gives that fair share. Of course, you know, we can't see into the future, but if the economy goes into recession, then the value of 10 mills will decrease. And the value of 10 mills in 2024 could be more than the value of 10 mills in 2026. So therefore, you should just leave it alone and judge it by every year. So if we get to next year or 2 or 3 years from now and see that 10 is, the digest is still increasing and school systems are starting to bump up against the 10 mil threshold, then at that time I'd say we ought to readdress it.
Okay, I'm thinking we should go ahead and address it while it's on the table, but that's my thought. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. We're going to go down the road to Floor Leader Wade with a question.
Appreciate you bringing the bill, and I'll say this: I'm double checking with my system, which I represent Dawson, Lumpkin, and White County, and Dawson's my home. Dawson has never been, at least in the last 26 years, I believe, a recipient of any equalization. Yet we still have a growing percentage of free and reduced lunch. So obviously, I'm very interested in tackling QBE at some point in the future. But my question is, I think Dawson County is in one of those systems that we may be getting really close to being actually at 10 mills. I'm confirming, but we may be about 10.9 or 11, and we're in a high growth area based on property values, our proximity to Lake Lanier, Big Canoe, retirement communities, etc.
10.8.
Okay, yeah, so we're at 10.8. So my mind, thank you for checking that.
Yes, sir.
I'm just a little bit concerned that, within 2 years, I'm not suggesting any changes at this point, but I think it kind of begs the question as to, do we need to look at this every 2 to 4 years? And does it need to be a part of something bigger in the future? And I'd love to work with the representative on that in the future. So thank you for bringing the bill.
Yes, I would concur with that.
All I know is if I could sell my house for what the county tells me it's worth, I'd make a lot of money. Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for this bill. So have you talked with like the school boards and the superintendents, and what are they saying about this?
Well, they would prefer it. Some school systems would prefer it because they are able to roll back, but they can't. And we're not basically, we're allowing some to roll back below the threshold and still giving them equalization. And I might be mistaken, but I don't think there's any statute that enforces that. So this adds that enforcement that if the local school system can roll back, it allows them to do so. If they don't have to, they don't have to. But if they go below the threshold, right now there's no, I wouldn't say penalty, but there's no clawback to take money back from equalization for systems that go below it. This adds that into it. So it kind of keeps them, keeps them honest.
Perfect. Anybody in the audience come to speak to the bill? You're speaking to the bill. He's a double duty. I love this. Come on up. I won't deny a colleague.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you being so considerate of my schedule to put these two bills on the same agenda. It really saved me a lot of travel. Thank you. I just wanted to thank Representative Cannon for this bill. This was a big issue up in my district during the last year. So it not only impacts districts below the gnat line, well, actually Moultrie's, I think it's even too hot and humid down there for the gnats. I think you leave the gnats by the time you get there. But down in that area of the country, it was an issue. It was also an issue up in northeast Georgia. And Representative Cannon can probably address this issue. He's clearly much more into the policy weeds than I am. But I believe the reason that you do want to have some kind of required minimum is you don't want systems to just, the idea is they do need to be pitching in a local portion to the operation of the school as well. They do need to at least try to not just to run their school system off equalization, but to run it off local monies, and this is to try to equalize the sort of financial burden they have with other counties in the state that may have a different demographic or a different valuation or property value. So where you set that number is a discussion, but I think the Representative Cannon, after discussing with some very knowledgeable folks, came up with that number, and we certainly, from my perspective, I think that's an issue to be worked out here in the committee. But I do think there should be some limit as a policy matter where it's set. You can decide, but I do believe it definitely needs to come down because it resulted in pretty painful property tax increases for a lot of people this year when the jurisdictions would have been willing to roll back, but if they went below that one threshold, suddenly they're in an upside down situation on their budgets because they lose all the equalization money. So I just thank him for bringing this bill, and I would really encourage the committee's favorable consideration of it, at least in some form.
Representative Cannon, be careful who you bring up. I got all these questions now. I'm going to go to number 25.
I don't have a question. I'm just going to make a motion to pass.
All right. I will entertain that motion. Do we have a second? All right. Any discussion on the motion? Floor Leader Wade.
And just clarification, I have a feeling that the 10 is a nice doubling of the local 5 mil. That may be something to do with why 10 needs to be the cap too, just for folks in the room, because no, I know, but there's a local 5 bill that goes into how they calculate, how they distribute it. So I'm sure there's some math calculation out there that I'm definitely going to dig into. So, but I'm glad we've got a motion to pass. I'm ready to vote. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I got my lunch right here. I'm ready to vote. All in favor of the motion do pass, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. You're on the full committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee,
And with
thank you.
that, the meeting of the subcommittee on policy is adjourned. Up next is subcommittee on curriculum.
There's a sign-up sheet up front if anybody would like to sign up. I don't know if you heard Courtney.
Have fun.
Yeah. Okay, we are running just a scooch behind, so we'll take a few minutes and get ourselves together, and then we'll get started. Okay, 2-minute warning. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the House Education Curriculum Subcommittee to order, and that's a mouthful, by the way. And I'm going to call on Representative Clark if he will open us in a word of prayer.
Definitely. Close our eyes. Dear Lord, I just thank you for today. Thank you for the time we have today. Just help us to always put the children first, God, over our own agendas, and raise this next generation. Be with all of us today. Be with those who are going through hardships, struggles, and we just thank you for all that you've given us. In the name of the Lord Jesus, amen.
Thank you. Thanks. I want to thank the members of our subcommittee and our audience for being here today. And we have one bill today, and this is going to be a hearing only. We won't be taking any votes today. We will just be listening to testimony and asking a lot of good questions. So I am going to call up Representative Carpenter, and I've got LC 491638S.
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to bring an expert on this matter with me as well, because you're going to have some technical questions, and I'm obviously not going to be able to answer those. So
you can go ahead whenever you're ready. Your mic should be on.
Mic is live. So you said LC 491638S. Is that what you have?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys. So just a little background on this legislation. This is legislation that has been dropped over the last few years by a friend across the aisle that really was it was a really important issue for her. And I signed it last year because just reading it to me it made perfect sense. As a father of 4, and as three teenagers and then one in 6th grade, it's an issue, and then a brother of an educator. It's an issue that's I think important for our state, and it's just something I think that we need to update. So basically what it's going to do, it's going to update sex education in the state so that it would be age appropriate, medically accurate. It would update AIDS to include HIV, because obviously we know we have a way of preventing AIDS and just staying in the HIV stage. And then it also discusses the importance of discussing consent. As a father of 2 daughters and 2 boys, I think that issue is not touched on enough in this educational system. My children go to a private school, so I don't think this will affect them at all. But I will tell you that it's a private Christian school, and they discuss consent in their program in the 8th grade because it's important in the world that we live in. And I think it gives people the ability to understand the situation, discuss it when they're uncomfortable, and prevent things from happening. And so without any more than that, obviously I could read the bill to you, but it's really, really pretty simple. I think the definition that you see on line 14 through 17 clarifies medically accurate, so that it's something that a lot of members heard over the off season about. There was some concern that it was vague, and I think that clarifies it for you. Obviously, people are going to have some concern on the issue, and they're going to want to discuss it. I am not a medical expert, but I am a father of 4 that's concerned about the well-beings of our children. And, abstinence is still going to be discussed in sex ed because that's the best way. There's no question about it. It's the best and the safest way for children not to experience any of the difficulties in this arena. But I will tell you that 90% of people aren't abstinent before marriage, and they do have sex. And so we can continue to dig our head in the sand as a state and say, let's focus on this because it's the best way.
when 90% of us, including a lot of Christians, are not following that path. And so I think it's important to get real with kids, because they're either going to learn it from in a nice controlled environment at school where locals will have some control over it, or they're going to learn about it on their cell phone. And I would argue that they've probably already learned about it on their cell phone, and it takes the educators to fix that. Because we're obviously, I'm sure, in 8th grade, where the majority, 7th and 8th grade, where the majority of this occurs, they've already been on their cell phone since the 5th and 4th grade. So these conversations are happening earlier in life. And as a father, that's disheartening. But as a public official, I think it's important to realize what's happening in the real world and get out in front of it to actually help the health of our youth and our society. So if you have any further questions, obviously, we're here. But that's basically the gist of the bill.
Do we hear any questions from the committee at this point?
Can't let them off that easy.
I had Scott Hilton in the committee sitting in a chair at a table like this for about 3.5 hours, so he's not going to let me off that.
No, I know. Taking bullets. I would ask, it's interesting, age appropriately medically accurate. By including it, it sort of infers that we're not providing that right now. What would be your comment on that?
So I think that there are districts that are. I talked to my school district, Whitfield County, and they are. I mean, that's a focal point of it. But I don't think it's consistent across the state. So I think there needs to be some parameters set, some parameters set by the state that then the locals will ultimately decide on the programming, but as long as it falls inside of that box, if that makes sense.
Representative Howard.
Yes, thank you for the bill. I can remember, I'm old enough to remember when, during my day, that we did have some of this teaching in the school system in Richmond County. The term age appropriate, I was looking for a definition. It sounds sort of subjective. Who makes that determination of what's age appropriate throughout the bill?
So the local school district will, but I would agree with you. I remember when I was in 8th grade, my favorite coach in the world, P.R. Benson, that went on to be a pastor, taught sex ed, and so I can still remember sitting in there talking about it. So it's an important issue, and I think it's one that actually kids will listen to versus a lot of other things. So, but the locals will decide that.
I've got number 28. Is that you, Representative Adana? Okay.
That's me. All right. It might be restating what Representative Howard said, but I just want to be clear. So control for the curriculum goes to the state, or does it?
The locals will decide on the material. The state's this legislation would set the parameters and to make sure it included, updated HIV, included medically accurate and age appropriate, just to be sure that that's what they're following, as well as that consent piece, which I would argue is an important piece to add to the legislation.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any further questions from the committee? If not, I'm going to call. We've got some people on our sign-up sheet, and I will be calling them. First up, Carrie McDonald Hill. And you can go up to, oh, you're already there. Never mind. Okay, so there you go.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank you, Representative Carpenter, District 4. I'd like to thank all of you for this opportunity. I'm Dr. Carrie Hill. I am a parent. I am a public health professor and a former health teacher for a Georgia public school. Today I'm representing GCAP, the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential, where I serve as vice president. Schools remain a consistent and available forum for our young people to learn sex education. We know through decades of research that sex education can help delay sexual initiation and help our young people avoid risky behaviors. Quality sex ed is so much more than that. When done well, it can increase self-esteem, It can build self-awareness. It can help our young people navigate puberty and help them to build healthy body image. Developing an effective sex ed curriculum is a rigorous process that requires specific training and extensive field testing. Sex education programs that are not age appropriate and medically accurate do not reflect the current research on effective sex education, and they contain incomplete, inaccurate, or misleading information. And some are based on opinions and rely on shame and fear-based tactics. It leaves young people unprepared as they develop. This bill ensures that young people will get the medically accurate information that they need. With GCAP, we partner with school districts to help them adhere to the Georgia Department of Education health standards. So you all asked the question about who determines. Well, it is a committee. So each school district has a committee that's made up of parents, it's made up of students, it's made up of community representatives who review the curriculum and determine which curriculum is appropriate for their students. Once that curriculum is adopted, that's when GCAP comes in, and we provide ongoing training and support for the school districts to make sure that they have all that they need to implement the curriculum effectively. HB 822 calls for age-appropriate content in the overall curriculum, and we know that that is something that is needed. Right now, the standards do speak to age-appropriate sexual assault and sexual abuse awareness, but this is age-appropriate throughout the curriculum. Consent is included in the bill because it is incomplete to address sexual assault and sexual awareness education without discussing consent. And a consent discussion in elementary grades, it includes information like how to identify a trusted adult, how to be a good friend, and discussions on medically accurate words for body parts to give children the language they would need if they needed to report someone is harming them or touching them inappropriately. Now, when I was a teacher, when I taught sex ed, at that particular school, we had sex ed for seniors. And so it was really interesting because I'm having discussions about puberty with individuals who are 17 and 18 years old. And so when we think about age appropriate, that's an example of probably not an appropriate discussion, right? When we think about age appropriate, we don't start trigonometry in the 12th grade, right? We have other forms of math that builds a foundation. It should be the same when it comes to sex ed. Age appropriate means that we are building a foundation as young people develop. In elementary school, as I mentioned, the discussion is on things like being a good friend and healthy communication, and it builds up. Our young people deserve honest, accurate education that is going to improve their health and that includes sex education that is age appropriate and medically accurate. The changes proposed to this bill are minor and simply ensure that the requirements are updated to meet scientific standards of 2024. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next on our list, Sydney Wilson. And you can come to the podium.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the Education Subcommittee for taking the time to listen to my testimony as to why House Bill 822 should be passed. My name is Sydney Yael Wilson, a third-year student at Spelman College and an intern for the Georgia Women's Policy Institute through the YWCA of Greater Atlanta. Today, I stand before you alongside advocates from the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential to share my testimony that underscores the urgent need for your support for House Bill 822. This bill addresses the critical issue of sexual miseducation, a pervasive problem that has shaped my own experiences and those around me. As we discuss my journey, let us recognize the profound impact that well-informed legislation can have on transforming the sexual education landscape in Georgia for better for generations to come. Growing up in a household with an active duty service member, I had the unique experience of receiving an education from numerous schools I attended throughout Texas, Kansas, Alabama, and Virginia, and within a small rural community in upstate New York. I was in the 5th grade when my sexual miseducation began. Sitting in a classroom segregated by male and female students huddled around a projector playing a dated video that covered how puberty affects the different sexes and the reproductive cycle. which scared most of us rather than encourage intellectual curiosity about our developing bodies. Reflecting on that moment, it became clear to me that our current sexual education framework holds males and female students to different educational standards. This personal revelation mirrors a broader issue that House Bill 822 aims to rectify by establishing an accurate and comprehensive sexual education curriculum. Now, as a college student within the Atlanta University Center, where students primarily hail from public schools in Georgia and other southern states, the widespread results of sexual miseducation are evident. I've also witnessed how a lack of age-appropriate and medically accurate sex education leads to an increase in unexpected pregnancies and the contraction of sexually transmitted diseases. It is increasingly urgent to use the testimonies brought before you today as a call to action to support legislation that will improve the state of sexual education in Georgia to provide better outcomes for Georgians. It is against this backdrop that House Bill 822 emerges as a beacon of hope, offering tangible solutions to pressing issues by establishing an accurate and comprehensive sexual education curriculum that ultimately prioritizes the long-term health and well-being of Georgian communities for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Aubrey, and I'm sorry, I can't read your last name. Escalera. Okay, that was going to be my guess, but I didn't. Thank you so much for coming today.
Yes, welcome everyone. Thank you for listening to my experience. My name is Aubriana Escalera, and I'm a graduate from a Georgia public school here in Georgia. Growing up, I grew up in a pretty conservative household. I grew up in the Methodist household, and I am an immigrant. And I enriched the Southern culture, and I'm thankful for the community that gave me an opportunity to give back. I remember going through school and not knowing who I was, not having the tools to understand my orientation or my gender, and experiencing that made me develop this thing for just sex was off topics. You weren't allowed to talk about it, and sex ed taught me that abstinence was the key. But what I didn't have was knowledge of prevention. I didn't know about PrEP, PAP, things of that nature. We didn't know these type of things growing up. Why was it that we had to be adults to know what these, life-changing medicine was out there, And later that I grew and I started to understanding, all the resources, I wish I knew that we had these different, medicines to prevent from obtaining, diseases that we thought that we could never get rid of. And just looking back, I wish that I had that support, that prevention, to know. And we know that many of us have, friends that were born with HIV, that they would never overcome these obstacles, that they didn't have a choice. And I've experienced and I've noticed that everyone is possible. And to take education away from students, to take the knowledge and the tools that they may need, because we know everyone doesn't, have the same stability, doesn't have the same resources. I didn't, but I was thankful enough to have a community that supported me, but they were ashamed of me. They were ashamed to know that I existed, the same way that many of us don't want us to know that, these resources are out there. And a lot of this just comes from, my experience growing up, me being raised the way I was raised. And I believe the language needs to change. Advanced HIV is a thing, but we know that people can live, a healthy lifestyle. But also, why is it that a person has to become an adult to know about prevention? And I feel like if I knew about prevention, I would probably save some of my fellow classmates and friends. And I thank you all for listening to my testimony. And like I said, I wish that I had more advanced information when it comes to prevention and care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mary Clausen.
I'm not going to talk very long, but is there a time limit? I didn't hear that. You just let me know if it's.
Well, everybody seems to have been about 3 or 4 minutes, so
Okay,
let's
that's
try
what I
to
was
do
thinking.
that.
Okay. My name is Mary Clausen. I'm a registered nurse, family nurse practitioner. I've been that for 35 years. I pulled my kids out of a public school system because there was a lot of sexual overexposure that they were too young for, frankly. It was 6th, 7th grade, 10, 11 years old. So they went to private school, and they were well educated on sexuality. We made sure that they knew what they needed to know. Made me start to follow different organizations to see where all this was coming from, because I didn't understand how a 10-year-old should know what their sexual preference was, for example. Started following GCAP and have watched some of their seminars, been to some of their programs, and I kind of realized where all this was coming from. They get millions of dollars of grant money to go out to talk to lots of representatives, to talk to lots of schools, to do all kinds of programs. I'm just a mom that does this out of my own pocket. I paid my own parking. I don't get paid for this, but I've read a lot and I've learned a lot. And what I've seen is that it's the motivation is good. We all want our kids to be safe and healthy. The problem is we're putting adult standards onto children. So anybody that's a child needs to be treated as a child. And the studies show, matter-of-factly, that all children, anyone under 18, is healthier, they do better long-term if they stay abstinent until they get married. That is the thing that's the healthiest for them. We don't say, oh, some kids smoke cigarettes, so let's give them all cigarettes and say, oh, it can be dangerous. We'll tell you a little bit about it, but this is how you can, not get cancer, make your wrist last. We don't do that. We tell kids what the healthiest things for them to do. Abstinence-based programs I've seen people talk about it all the time. There's no such thing. They're abstinence-encouraged programs. It's called sexual risk avoidance. And they basically say the safest, healthiest thing for you to do is to avoid sex until you're married. If saying everybody has sex 90%, that is not true. 70% are involved sexually as high schoolers, but 50% do not have sexual intercourse until they are out of high school. That's proven. So, and that should be lower, but it's what it is. But you're talking about 50% of the kids don't have sex in high school. We've got to give kids credit. We've got to give kids the respect. They can control their bodies. They have lots of hormones, lots of stuff going on, but they can control it with help from their parents and different support systems that they have. Medically accurate, age-appropriate consent are buzzwords for comprehensive sex education. I've emailed you guys all a great chart. It has sexual risk avoidance, sexual risk reduction. And a lot of the same information is in both programs, how to prevent STDs, how to prevent pregnancies. The difference is the sexual risk reduction is this is how you decrease your risk. We know you're all going to have sex, so we'll tell you to make sure to use a condom and get consent, and you're good to go. The sexual risk avoidance says there's emotional consequences to sexual activity, and we want you to know what those are. So I would love to be able to spend as much time with all of you as GCAP has been able to do, just to give you some of that data so you all can make the best decision that you can. But it's a lot of false information out there as well. I think both sides have false information because we both have, I guess, two different agendas. But we both have the agenda of kids being healthy and safe. PrEP is the thing that a lot of money is going into with pharmaceuticals, and that's basically HIV prevention. And so they want people that are having sex with high risk to be able to take PrEP to decrease their chances of getting HIV, which I was posed to say, if you're giving all these meds out there, there's going to be more sex happening. And again, adults can do what they want. After 18, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the kids. And we don't want the kids to be out there risking their health. We want them to get the best thing they can do. And we don't want PrEP should be a private conversation with the patient and their doctor. That shouldn't be something that the schools are pushing or clinics are pushing. It should be a patient-doctor relationship. Any other questions or information I can help you with?
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Okay, are there any more questions for Representative Carpenter? 26, is that? Okay. Representative Clark.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I think a little bit on this bill, it has potential or huge potential to shift it more to consent talk, and which I think in the end could encourage more sex with these younger kids. What examples can you provide how the abstinence-based sex ed has failed to teach kids healthy boundaries?
So I think you can see, I think you have a chart in front of you, right, that shows kind of how it works when they have it and when they don't. You got your blue and your lime green there. Do you have that sheet in front of you that shows the percentages of, obviously everybody's teenage pregnancy rates are down. The sexually transmitted diseases have gone up in both categories, but the better programming has provided only a 3% increase versus a 20% increase. And so I think that what we're asking here, and I appreciate the lady's comments just then, because I think we're all on the same team here. We're just trying to figure out a way to get there. And I would challenge you that 90% of individuals have sex before they get married. I mean, you can look online, you see the stats. I'm not saying they have it before they get out of high school, but before they're actually married. And so I think to let abstinence just be the driver is dangerous. And I understand the concern that consent is dangerous as well, but I think at some point kids respond to when you're real with them, and otherwise they get into a situation that they don't know how to handle. And I think from as somebody that grew up, a lot of we try to attack stuff like this with the idea that everybody's going home and they got two parents that want to sit down and talk to them about that, and that's just not the reality of the world that we live in. I wish it was 1950 and everybody had two parents at home and everything was great and we wouldn't have problems, but we got problems, and a lot of it stems because there's one person at the house and they ain't got time. They're working all the time and they ain't got time to talk about this stuff, and so they need the school to talk about it. And to educate kids on having these conversations to protect themselves, I think, to me is a big deal. And when I knew that when I was looking over this legislation, I thought it was a good idea. But then when I talked to, what they were doing in Whitfield County, but also what they were doing at my kids' private Christian school, talking about consent, I just think that making sure we're doing that across the state is going to do the state a lot of good when we've got high HIV rates, et cetera, on down the road. So I think it's important that we update it. I mean, if you look on the back, it shows some of the states that are in the South that have this. Tennessee's got it, Alabama's got it, Virginia's got it, North Carolina's got it. So it's not like we're recreating the wheel. It's not like we're opening Pandora's box and all of a sudden we're going to be having conversations that are going to freak people out, right? It's just saying, let's update the code. Let's make sure that it's age appropriate and that everybody understands it's age appropriate. Let's make sure the locals have say in it, but just put some parameters up that everybody can agree with. I don't think if this legislation passed, much would change in Whitfield County, but it might change somewhere else because I think we're doing it that way now. But I do think there's places aren't, and I think that to me is important. So.
Representative Howard.
Yeah, I think you may have kind of answered part of my question that I had. Does this bill remove abstinence from sex education, the curriculum?
No, absolutely not.
So it would be included as a part of it?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be crazy not to. The best way not to get lung cancer is not to smoke cigarettes.
I think it's an appropriate question. That we make sure that is. I didn't see it, stated in here, and where rather than just making that assumption.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, abstinence is the best policy, no doubt about it.
Right.
Never non-refutable.
Representative Daniel.
Hey, friend.
Hey, girl, what's up?
How are you?
I'm good.
I appreciate the intent of this legislation, and you and I have talked at length about it. There was a question I wanted to talk to you about, though, in terms of the consent aspect. I noticed on line 46 of the existing code, we already have this to some extent in terms of addressing sexual assault and trying to prevent that. So I'm not understanding what the changes would create that the current code does not already cover. I am a little concerned that we are going to open a Pandora's box in terms of what how consent is discussed in a setting that it may not be appropriate to discuss, like kindergarten.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that I see the lines that you're talking about, and it looks like they're just rewriting that to clean up the code. I don't know that anything changes much on lines 44 through 46. I do think that they just make sure they added it back up top as well to make sure it was clear on the top section in line 28, maybe if my eyes are working, 27. But yes, I understand your concern, and obviously the last thing I want to do is open a Pandora's box for anybody's kids. But I do think it's important to be real with kids, and I think our outcomes will be much better if we are. Yep. Yeah, and hold on one second.
Hang on. What number are you? 25? Okay.
I guess my second concern is the part about medical accuracy. I think on the surface that sounds wonderful. But we have seen, and we took up a pretty hefty bill last year in terms of, we had some medical authorities and research studies and come out against it. One of the issues that we were handling that, didn't align with what has been historically considered medically accurate. And so I think this is okay on the surface, but I'm not sure that it's not opening some questionable areas that don't need to be opened.
So I wanted to first address your comment about consent, just making it clear that consent is not just about sex. So when we're discussing consent in the elementary grades, it's things like consenting to a hug, consenting to share your toys. Those are the types of discussions that we're having. So again, it's age appropriate, developmentally appropriate conversation. And when we think about sex ed and the ultimate goal, it's to prepare our young people to make healthy decisions, not just while they're in K through 12, but lifelong decisions. And so, as you mentioned, there's so many who even, after we say on this paper, it says around 50% are engaging in sex during the high school years, but we're talking about beyond. We want to be able to prepare our young people for healthy decisions. So again, just making it clear that the consent discussions are very appropriate for the age group.
And then as far as the medically accurate, I do think what you're saying, it can be a slippery slope, because what's medically accurate to some is not medically accurate to all. So I think that piece to me is protected in that local piece, where the locals are involved in the conversation that says, well, that guy says it's medically accurate, but he's not a real doctor. He's a fake doctor, But I do think the input from the doctors are important, and if it's medically accurate for you when you go to your OBGYN to have these conversations, then why should we not be presenting that same information to the kids in school? Because it's been a beaten horse all year about maternal mortality rates and all those things, and I think a lot of these issues we can get on the front side of and educate kids, not only with sex, but also if you do get pregnant, what is the best pathway forward on that? Because I think that, as somebody who voted for the heartbeat bill, it was the easiest vote I've ever taken in this chamber, because I love kids. When you have your kid beside me in the chamber, it's like the greatest thing ever. but I think I want to see them educated so that they don't fall into things that they, because these are decisions that if you make the wrong decision, especially concerning STDs, is something you have the rest of your life. And so if we can prevent that, I'm game.
Did you have a follow-up? I saw you blinking.
And I agree with your underlying premise. I think that teaching kids what's appropriate and what's not is important. And, as a teen mom, I recognize that kids are going to do what they're going to do in high school. However, at the end of the day, I do believe that parents have the ultimate say of what is age appropriate for their kids. And I think when we bring in different organizations that may or may not agree with the parents on what is age appropriate, because we're seeing that kind of all over in books and some other areas, but what we historically believe is age appropriate isn't what's being taught in schools sometimes. And so I just want to caution you this.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. I have one question just for clarification purposes. So right now, at the beginning of the year, when you get your those 97,000 papers that you get from your kid's school at the beginning of the year, you can opt your child out of the sex ed curriculum that is in your school. Nothing changes as far as that, correct? Parents still have that opt out.
That's correct.
Pathway. Okay.
Yeah, and I actually have the language here to read to you all. It says, prior to the parent or legal guardian making a choice to allow his or her child to take a specific unit of instruction, he or she shall be told what instruction is to be provided and have the opportunity to review all instructional material to be used, print and non-print. Any parent or legal guardian of a child to whom a course of study in sex education is to be taught shall have the right to elect in writing that such child not receive such course of study. So that speaks to the opt-out. Nothing changes about that. And just wanted to add, based on just the review committee. So there is a committee that includes parents. It includes representatives of the community, educators, health professionals, community representatives. This community is what reviews the curriculum prior to it being adopted by the district.
Okay, I do not see any further questions, and so thank y'all for coming today. You have given us a lot to think about, and I'm sure we'll be talking with Representative Carpenter as we go forward. Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
Appreciate you.